Welcome back to the Art of Boat Building. I took a long needed break over the holidays and doing some traveling and visiting with my family. Right now what I'm doing is I'm preparing a set of 4 coasters as a gift for some of my upper level Patreons that have been with me for several months. So what I have here is black walnut, which is used for the trim and transom, white oak, which is used for the frames, Atlantic white cedar, which is used for the planking, and spruce, which will be used for the sprues and spars. So if you want more interested about how you could receive a set of these, wait till the end of the video and I'll tell you a little more about that. So this video will be the first of a series of videos on Carvel planking. In this episode, we're going to start with doing some lining off and how to spile. So stick around. That's all coming up in this episode of The Art of Boat Building. My name is Bob Emser. I'm a sculptor and a boat builder. My sculptures have always been inspired by nautical and aeronautical imagery. In fact, sometimes people passing by my studio would ask if I'm building a boat. I've always enjoyed the artistry of wooden boats. It seems like I've been building boats for over 40 years, and now I'm building sculptures that float. Welcome to the Art of Boat Building. Well, it's good to be back after my winter break. Always feels good to get back working on the boat. Today, we're going to talk about spiling. And spiling is a way of generating points to determine the perimeter of a plank. So the first step is to do what's called lining off. And lining off is determining the width of each plank that will be on the boat and how they will lay on the boat from the stem to the stern. So if you'll remember in episode 5, I had already lined off the hull. And by doing that, what I did is I started at the shear and I divided it up so that at least above the water line, the planks appeared to be of equal width. The one plank that was not determined is the garboard, and the garboard is the first plank that's against the keel. So what I've done here is I've taken a rib band and I've positioned it on the boat so that I can figure out what the perimeter of that plank will be. Now, on this boat, what I've decided to do is to make the garboard wider than most of the other planks, and that's actually a very typical thing to do with boats. So I purchased a couple of extra wide cedar planks for the garboard, and those planks in their rough dimension measure 8 inches. So what I've done in determining where this would be is I've measured along here so that I made sure that I'm always less than 8 inches. I think the widest that I've got is just about 7 1/4. So that gives me a little leeway to determine that. So the first thing to do in order to spile is to prepare a spiling batten. And so that's what we'll do first. Over at the table saw, I took some 1/4-inch plywood and ripped it down into 3.5-inch strips. And before I attach that batten, I want to mark out where this rib band sets. I have that marked. I'll go through and put a mark so that I know that that's the finished edge of the garboard. So after I get those marked, the next step is to tack down the batten. And I'm just going to use some small nails here. And the trick is to put the batten so that you're about equal distance from the top of the garboard to the bottom of the garboard. And then we'll just go through and put a few tacks in here. The tacks are a little better than clamps in that then it doesn't shift around, where sometimes if you clamp it, you could lose your measurement. And it's really critical that the batten board stay exactly where you put it. So the first method of spiling that I wanted to show you, and most likely the most common, is using a compass. The old school kind of compasses that you probably are familiar with don't work really well in that it's really critical that the arc or the radius that you've set with the compass stays exactly at that. So it's best to have a pair of locking compasses. That's a little harder to find. So I ended up actually making a pair of compass so that you can see that it locks really well here and it holds a pencil nice and tight. So this method is essentially putting the point in here where the, need a little bit more of an arc on that. The point in here where it meets the rabbet, the bottom of the rabbet, and then simply strike in an arc like so. Then you would do the same thing here where the top of the garboard plank will be and strike an arc. Now I've done that right in line with one of the frames, but you could also, if it was very complicated, you can actually do this at any point that you wanted to. So we'll just do one out here. Put this one over here just because I need something to point the compass on. So the theory is then when you put the compass on that arc and cross it, it doesn't matter where on here you put it, cross it, and you'll end up with that point accurately. So you would do this throughout the entire batten. Now, the next method that I want to show you is using a spiling block. And a spiling block is simply a little piece of wood that you create. In this case, I made this out of a piece of walnut, mainly so that it won't get lost as a piece of scrap in the studio. So with a pencil, now with this method, it's good to have the frame stations marked out. So I'm going to take a straight edge here and line it up with the frame and make a mark. I'll do a couple of them here to show you how that works. The spiling block then is simply a piece of wood that has been tapered down to a point on one end, and then it is cut out the thickness of the spiling batten. And to use this, you just push this up into the joint of the rabbet tightly, and then you would scribe a line on two sides of the spiling block, and then draw an arrow indicating that this goes to that side of the garboard. Then to do the other side, you would simply line this up with this line here. And again, scribe it, like so, and then this one goes to the other side. So the last method that I want to show you is using a bent-legged dividers. So in order to do this, the one thing that needs to be done is we need to record the edge of the frame station here on the batten board. Now what I have done is I have taken this pair of this compass and I've made a bent leg pointer to fit into it. So what we do with this is we put that bent leg into the crux of the rabbet, and then we would, in line with that, make a mark or a dent in the batten. Then we'd swing this over and make another dent, like so. So now we take those two spots and we circle them, connect them, and then draw an arrow pointing that goes to the rabbet side of the garboard. Then we do the same thing on the bottom, line that up where the bottom will be, make a point, and then do the same thing again, make a point. So circle those two, connect them, and then draw an arrow pointing to this side of the plank. So this is the method that I'm going to use to spile the garboard. In the meantime, I'm going to take this temporary batten off and put it over on a piece of plywood so you can show you how we extract these points onto a plank. So what I've done here is I've taken that spiling batten and I've tacked it down to a piece of 8-inch wide plywood. This is the dimension of the cedar stock that I have for the garboard. So let me show you how we transfer those original points out to the perimeter of the plank. So the compass method, we would start with that arc that we had struck, and we simply find any point along there and strike an arc. And then find another second point and strike an arc. And that then gives us the point of which is the original edge of the garboard. So I'll do it again here real quick. Strike an arc. And strike an arc. Now, you can see that it doesn't matter where I put that on there, it still ends up being in the same point. So we move down to the second method that I showed you, which was using the spiling block. And the spiling block, we would simply line up with those two lines. So the arrow is heading this way. So we line up these two lines and then make a mark there. Same thing would be true then with the other side, like so. The third method, and the most preferred as far as I'm concerned, is doing the compass or the divider method. So let's switch out this pencil real quick for the bent leg divider. You know, you remember that this is really easy to find that point, so you can see that it's already set at that. So what we do here is, and I've already transferred these frame marks to the plank, like so. So what we do is we would line up the leg, the arrow is pointing to this side, so we'd use that line, pick that point, and then come up and make a mark. And then once we make that mark, circle it so we can find it. So the other direction, I'll use the bent leg here, like so. So the using bent leg dividers is really, in my estimation, the most accurate way to spile a plank. So now we're going to go to the boat and we're going to put on our for real Spiling battens, and I'll show you how I'm going to determine that garboard plank. So as we get ready to start spiling our first plank here, the front edge of the plank is called the hood end. And in boats, especially in small craft, where the stem is really the most complicated part, and it's really hard to get a lot of accurate measurements when something curves like that. So what is commonly happens is what is making a pattern that's called a hood end pattern. So that's what I've done here. So I've made a hood end pattern, and the way that I did that is I first took a piece of scrap and scribed the back side of it here to get the general shape. Once I had the general shape, I took this small block with a hole in it and scribed a line along the rabbet in order to get a more accurate measurement. Once I had that cut out, I then just used my hand plane to trim it up a little bit and get it to fit in there. So now that we have the hood end pattern made and fit in here, now we can start attaching the Spiling battens to the rest of it. Once we get the hood end pattern tacked in place, we can now then position our first Spiling batten on here. And we'll just line that up so that we're about equal distance, like I had mentioned before. We'll clamp it temporarily. So the next thing we want to do once we have the Spiling batten in place is we want to put a gusset on here to attach the hood pattern to the Spiling batten. And we're going to do that with some hot glue. And then just as security measures, we put a couple of staples in there to make sure it doesn't move around. All right, so we'll tack this down and then we'll add a piece to the end. All right, now we're ready to start spiling. As I'm going along and marking out the frame stations, I'm also writing down what station it is here just as a reference. So that's it for spiling. We can now get ready to find a plank in order to transfer all of this data to. So we'll do all of that in the next episode and be able to cut out the garboard and offer it up to the boat. But in the meantime, let's take a look at those coasters that I was making. If you'd like to receive a set of these coasters and help support my channel, all you have to do is go to the Patreon and pledge at the $15 or higher mark. I send out a gift a couple of times a year. If that's not something you feel like you're comfortable with, any little donation will help. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time on The Art of Boat Building.